Picture this scenario. You're sitting at your kitchen table on a Tuesday night and your spouse says, "We need to talk about our credit card debt." Your stomach sinks. You owe $8,000 spread across 3 cards. The minimum payments are killing you, $240 a month just to stand still, while interest compounds faster than you can pay it down. You lie awake at night wondering how you got here and if you'll ever get out. At this rate, it'll take 7 years to pay off, and you'll pay almost $4,000 in interest. That's a used car you just threw away. Now scale that feeling up by about 1 trillion, because that's where almost every country on Earth is right now. The United States owes over $36 trillion. Japan owes more than 260% of its entire GDP. Italy is at 144% debt to GDP. Even Germany, the poster child of fiscal responsibility, is sitting on nearly $3 trillion in debt. France, $3.5 trillion. The UK, $3.1 trillion. Canada, almost $2 trillion. And here's what keeps me up. If you walked up to 100 people on the street and asked who their country owes this money to, maybe 2 could give you a coherent answer. The rest would guess China, or quote one, or just shrug. Most people have no idea how the single biggest number in their country's economy works. My name is Uncle Dan, and I spend way too much time thinking about the invisible mechanics of money and the systems that keep entire nations trapped on financial hamster wheels. If you've ever wondered why your government is always talking about debt ceilings and budget deficits, or if you've ever thought, wait, if everyone is in debt, who exactly is everyone in debt to? Hit that subscribe button, because today we're exposing one of the biggest financial illusions in the modern world. We're answering the question nobody seems to want to explain. Why is every country drowning in debt, and who do they owe? And I'm warning you, once you understand this, you're going to be angry. You're going to realize the entire global financial system is basically a Ponzi scheme dressed up in a suit. You're going to see that the people running this game have been lying to you about what money is, and why your grandkids will be paying for decisions made by politicians who've been dead for decades. Here's the thing most people don't understand about government debt. When you hear the U.S. owes $36 trillion, your brain thinks of it like your credit card bill. You picture some giant creditor waiting for Uncle Sam to pay up. You imagine China showing up at the border saying, "Okay, time's up. We're repossessing California." But that's not how this works, and understanding the actual mechanics will make you question everything you thought you knew about money, power, and who's really in control. Because here's the dirty secret. The debt doesn't work like your credit card. It's way weirder and way more rigged. Let's start with the fundamentals. What even is government debt? When a country goes into debt, it's not walking into a bank, it's issuing bonds. A bond is an IOU. The government says, quote 2, that extra $50 is interest, your compensation for loaning money instead of spending it. Think of it like a GoFundMe campaign, except instead of medical bills, they're raising money for aircraft carriers and Social Security checks. And instead of relying on kindness, they're relying on the fact that their bonds are considered one of the safest investments in the world. Now here's where it gets interesting. Who's buying these bonds? Who's lending to governments? The answer will surprise and piss you off. The biggest holders of government debt aren't foreign countries or shadowy billionaires. The biggest creditor to most governments is their own citizens. When you put money into a retirement account, pension fund, or savings account, that money doesn't sit there. Your bank or fund manager invests it. And one of the safest investments? Government bonds. They're considered risk-free because governments can print money to pay you back. So when politicians talk gravely about national debt, they're largely talking about money the government owes its own people. The U.S. government owes about $26 trillion to American individuals, banks, pension funds, and the Social Security Trust Fund. That's right, the Social Security money you've been paying in through payroll taxes. The government took it, spent it, and gave the trust fund IOUs in the form of bonds. They borrowed from your retirement to pay for today's expenses, hoping they can borrow from someone else to pay you back later. Only about $7.6 trillion of U.S. debt is owned by foreign countries. Japan holds about $1.1 trillion. China holds roughly $850 billion, down from over $1.3 trillion a decade ago. The UK holds about $700 billion. Even tiny Luxembourg holds over $300 billion. But even these foreign holdings aren't what you think. When China quotes one U.S. debt, they're not doing it as a power play. They're parking money somewhere safe. China runs a massive trade surplus with the U.S. They sell us everything at Walmart. Those transactions happen in dollars. China ends up with billions of U.S. dollars monthly. What are they going to do with all those dollars? They can't convert them all to yuan without crashing their own currency and making Chinese exports more expensive, which kills their export economy. So they buy U.S. Treasury bonds, safe, pays interest, maintains the currency balance they need, and here's the thing, China can't weaponize this debt. If they dumped all their bonds to crash our economy, they'd destroy their own holdings. It would be like setting your house on fire to make your neighbor's lawn look bad. The debt creates mutually assured economic destruction. Now you might be thinking, okay, Uncle Dan, but if we owe ourselves most of this money, what's the big deal? Can't we just forgive it? This is where the house of cards reveals itself. The reason governments can't cancel their debt is because those bonds are assets for millions of people. Your grandmother's pension, backed by government bonds. Her $2,000 monthly check is funded by bond interest. Your 401k, probably 20 to 40% bonds. The mutual fund you're in, filled with bonds. Your bank, required by law to hold capital in safe assets, government bonds. If the government said, sorry, we're not paying back our bonds, it wouldn't just hurt some faceless creditor. It would wipe out retirement accounts nationwide. Banks would suddenly be insolvent. Insurance companies would collapse. Think about 2008 when just housing collapsed. Banks failed. Unemployment hit 10%. Retirement accounts got cut in half. Now imagine if it wasn't just housing, but the foundation of the entire global economy. It would make 2008 look like a practice run. The debt isn't just a number on a spreadsheet. It's the foundation of the entire financial system. It's what the whole game is built on. And everyone knows it, which is why the game continues. And here's the truly insidious part. This is the part that should make you furious. Governments have figured out that they can keep borrowing indefinitely, as long as people believe they'll eventually pay it back. It's the world's largest confidence game. As long as bond markets believe that the U.S. or Japan or Germany will honor their debts, they can keep issuing new bonds to pay off old bonds. It's like using one credit card to pay off another credit card, except on a national scale. And somehow it's considered responsible fiscal policy. This is where we need to talk about interest rates, the mechanism that either saves governments or destroys them. When a government issues a bond, the interest rate is determined by how risky investors think that loan is. If you're the United States with the world's reserve currency and a 200-year track record, you can borrow for almost nothing. U.S. 10-year Treasury bonds pay around 4.5%, which is still cheap. In the 1980s, these paid 15% because inflation was raging. Germany borrows at 2 to 3%. Japan borrows at under 1% because their citizens buy government bonds with almost religious devotion. But if you're Argentina, which has defaulted 9 times, you're paying 15 to 40% just to convince anyone to lend. Turkey pays over 25% because investors think they might not get paid back. And here's the trap. The higher your interest rate, The more of your budget goes to interest payments instead of schools, infrastructure, health care. Greece was spending 20% of government revenue just on interest. When you're in that situation, your economy weakens, investors trust you less, rates rise higher, it's a death spiral. So why do countries keep borrowing? Why not just live within their means? Here's the truth. Modern economies are built on perpetual growth, and growth requires investment. Infrastructure doesn't build itself. Schools, hospitals, roads, bridges all require massive capital up front. Governments could raise taxes to pay cash, but that's political suicide. Raise taxes 20% to fund infrastructure, and you'll get voted out before the first highway is paved. People hate taxes, but love new bridges. So, governments borrow. Take money now, build the thing, bet that economic growth will create enough tax revenue to pay back loans. Sometimes it works, like the U.S. interstate highway system. Often it doesn't. There's also a darker reason governments love debt. It lets politicians buy votes with future people's money, spend $1 trillion today on popular programs, free health care, new schools, tax cuts, boost the economy, get reelected. By the time the bill comes due in 20 years, you'll be retired on a fat pension. It'll be someone else's problem. This is the fundamental flaw of democratic budgeting. The benefits of spending are immediate and visible. You cut a ribbon, people applaud. The costs are delayed and abstract. The deficit increased, doesn't make anyone boo, so every generation borrows more, kicks the can, and the debt grows. Why wouldn't they? They won't be around when the music stops. Let me give you numbers that will make your head spin. Global debt, government, corporate, and household combined, is now over $300 trillion. The entire GDP of planet Earth is about $100 trillion per year. Humanity collectively owes 3 times more than it produces annually. Who do we owe it to? Mostly each other, in this bizarre circular system where everyone is simultaneously a creditor and a debtor. And here's where the scam gets truly Orwellian, where we enter the realm of financial alchemy that would make medieval wizards jealous. Central banks, the institutions that control money supply, like the Federal Reserve in the U.S., the European Central Bank, the Bank of Japan, the Bank of England, have figured out a cheat code. When a government can't find enough buyers for its bonds, when investors start getting nervous and demanding higher interest rates, the central bank just prints money and buys the bonds itself. This is called quantitative easing, or QE, which is a fancy term designed to make you not realize what's actually happening. Let me break this down in plain English. The government says, quote 1, they issue bonds, but let's say investors only want $700 billion worth. The central bank says, no problem, we'll buy the other $300 billion. Where does the central bank get the money? They create it out of thin air with keystrokes. They literally add zeros to their balance sheet and take the bonds in return. So the government has borrowed from itself, using money it created from nothing. It's like writing yourself a check from an account that doesn't exist. And the Federal Reserve's balance sheet went from $870 billion in 2007 to over $8 trillion at its peak. They created $7 trillion in 15 years. Japan's been doing this since the 1990s, the ECB since 2015. And the only reason this doesn't immediately collapse is because everyone agrees to pretend it's normal. It's a confidence game at global scale. As long as people believe the currency has value, it has value. It's collective delusion is monetary policy. But you know what happens when you print trillions of dollars? When you expand the money supply by 800%, the money that already exists becomes worth less. It has to. It's basic supply and demand. If there's twice as much money chasing the same amount of goods, prices go up. This is inflation. the hidden tax that erodes your savings and your paycheck without you even noticing, without a single vote being cast, without any democratic input whatsoever. While politicians brag about stimulus and economic recovery and saving the economy, your dollar is quietly losing purchasing power. What cost $100 in 2000 costs $180 today. Your salary might have gone up, but not nearly as much. The government is effectively stealing from savers to fund its borrowing, and they're doing it in slow motion so you don't notice all at once. If they took 30% of your savings account in one day, you'd riot. But if they take 3% per year for 10 years through inflation, you barely notice. You just vaguely feel like everything is more expensive, and you can't quite figure out why. And here's what makes it even more insidious. Inflation helps debtors and hurts creditors. If you borrowed $100,000 at 3% interest, but inflation runs at 5%, you're effectively being paid to borrow. The government knows this. They're the biggest debtor in history. Inflation is their friend. It quietly reduces the real value of their debt every year. That $36 trillion they owe, if inflation runs hot for a decade, the real value might effectively drop to $25 trillion. They paid off $11 trillion just by devaluing the currency, and your savings, your salary, your pension, all devalued by the exact same amount. Now here's the part that should terrify you, and I mean genuinely keep you up at night. What happens if this system breaks? What happens if investors lose confidence and stop buying government bonds? What happens if interest rates spike and countries can't afford to pay even the interest on their debt, let alone the principal? What happens when the music stops and everyone realizes there aren't enough chairs? History gives us some clues, and they're not pretty. When Weimar Germany couldn't pay its war reparations after World War I, they printed money to pay debts. Inflation went exponential. By 1923, prices doubled every few days. A loaf of bread that cost 250 marks in January cost 200 billion marks by November. Workers were paid twice daily because money lost value by the hour. People used wheelbarrows of cash for groceries. There's a famous photo of children playing with stacks of money like building blocks because the paper was worth more than the currency. Life savings evaporated. The middle class was destroyed. The political chaos that followed gave rise to extremism and eventually the Third Reich. Hyperinflation doesn't just destroy economies, it destroys societies. When Zimbabwe tried to print its way out of debt in the 2000s, inflation hit 89.7 sextillion% per year. That's not a typo. They printed a $100 trillion bill, and it couldn't buy a bus ticket. The currency became worthless overnight. People's entire life savings, their pensions, everything they'd worked for, gone. Turned into toilet paper, except toilet paper was worth more. And it's not just ancient history or faraway countries. In 2001, Argentina defaulted on $93 billion, the largest sovereign default in history at the time. The economy collapsed overnight. Banks froze accounts. Unemployment hit 25%. Poverty rates doubled. People who had been comfortable, engineers, teachers, doctors, were suddenly digging through garbage. The peso lost 75% of its value in weeks. A generation lost. In 2010, Greece nearly defaulted, and only a massive EU and IMF bailout saved them at the cost of brutal austerity. Youth unemployment hit 60%. Pensions were cut by 40%. Suicide rates spiked. Anyone with skills fled to Germany or the UK. Lebanon defaulted in 2020. The currency lost 98% of its value, from 1,500 to over 89,000 to the dollar in 3 years. People can't access their bank accounts. The country has rolling blackouts. This is happening right now in what was once called the Switzerland of the Middle East. This isn't theoretical. This isn't fear-mongering. This is what happens when the debt game ends badly. And every single one of these countries thought it couldn't happen to them right up until it did. You might be thinking, okay, Uncle Dan, this is depressing as hell. This is existential dread in YouTube form. What am I supposed to do about it? I can't fix the national debt. I can't change monetary policy. I'm just trying to pay my rent and maybe save for retirement. And you're right. You can't fix this. This is a systemic problem that will take decades to resolve, if it ever gets resolved at all. But you can protect yourself. You can make sure that when the music stops, you're not the one left holding worthless paper. And understanding the game is the first step to not being a victim of it. First, recognize that inflation is coming. When governments have unsustainable debt, they have three options: default, austerity, or inflation. Default destroys credibility. Austerity is political suicide, so they choose inflation. Print money, devalue currency, erode debt's real value while claiming they're managing the economy. Your cash savings are a melting ice cube. $50,000 in savings, earning 0.5% while inflation runs at 4%, means you're losing $1,750 per year in purchasing power. Over 10 years, that's $17,500 destroyed, not because you spent it, but because the government needed to inflate away its debt. You need assets that appreciate with inflation: real estate, stocks, commodities like gold and silver, even Bitcoin despite volatility. Having 5 to 10% of your wealth outside the traditional banking system isn't crazy anymore. It's prudent. Second, government bonds might not be the safe investment they're advertised as. U.S. Treasuries have never technically defaulted, but, quote, zero doesn't mean never lost value. If inflation runs at 5% and your bond pays 3%, you're losing 2% per year in real purchasing power. It's a soft default, and it's happening now. Third, diversify geographically and across asset classes. The people who survived currency collapses in Argentina, Zimbabwe, Venezuela, and Lebanon had assets elsewhere: foreign accounts, property abroad, gold outside the banking system. Having 10 to 20% of wealth outside any one system is smart risk management. Foreign stocks through international index funds, property in stable countries, or cash in stable currencies like euros or Swiss francs. Fourth, focus on skills and relationships over stuff. In every economic collapse, people who did okay had valuable skills: doctors, engineers, electricians, farmers, mechanics. Paper money might become worthless, but the ability to fix things or grow food, that has value in any economy. Invest in yourself, learn, build community. When systems break down, those are the only currencies that matter. And look, I know this sounds like I'm telling you the house is on fire and the exits are locked, but here's the thing. The system is designed to keep you complacent. The politicians will tell you everything is fine. The economists will say debt doesn't matter because we owe it to ourselves. The media will distract you with culture wars and celebrity gossip, but the math doesn't lie. At some point, the exponential growth of debt runs into the physical limits of economic reality. And when that happens, the people who understand the game will survive. The people who stayed asleep will lose everything. Every country is in debt because the system rewards borrowing and punishes saving. The people they owe are mostly themselves, a circular trap where governments borrow from citizens to pay citizens, while skimming off the top and letting inflation eat the difference. It's not a conspiracy. It's just the logical outcome of a system where the people who make the rules benefit from kicking the can down the road, and the can is running out of road. If this video made you see government debt differently, if you finally understand why every country is playing the same game, share this with someone who needs to hear it. We don't talk about this stuff enough because it's uncomfortable and complicated, but ignorance won't protect you when the music stops. Hit that subscribe button, give this a thumbs up, and get ready because we're going to keep peeling back the layers of this financial illusion until everyone sees what's really happening. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.